All right, it's our auto series, and Ayo is back in the house. Give me a high five. Okay, so today we're talking about driving in a rainy season, or driving in a storm, or driving where there's flood.
Exactly.
Right, so it's not just only rain. So there could be flood somewhere, and then you're driving. So I know a number of people know, or they don't think that the rain does anything to their cars. But then let's talk about the dangers of driving anyhow in a flood and when it's raining.
All right, so it's inevitable. You cannot avoid driving through the rain or driving through flood. But there are certain things you should have at the back of your mind. You should know that, okay, when I'm approaching the flood, there are things I'm supposed to do. I'm not supposed to do this, I'm not supposed to do that. So the first one I'm going to talk about is driving very fast through flood. There's this mentality a lot of people have that when I see a large pool of water, I want to drive through very fast. It helps me wash the underneath of my car. I've heard that several times.
You know, they'll
tell you.
Okay, so
they'll tell you it helps me wash the underneath of my car. The mud and everything moves off. But contrary to that, it actually does a lot of damage to the car, because when you move very fast, you have a fan here.
Okay.
A fan that might be rotating at that point in time. Now that fan is going to pick up the water and it's going to move the water all the way to the top here. Now if you don't have an engine cover like this, which I'm going to move to this side, you have coils, ignition coils here, you have a lot of electricals here. If you have one wire that's slightly peeled off, the insulation is slightly peeled off, you have water move to that, that can cause an electrical surge in the car, which can damage a whole lot of things. You have your alternator here, which if water gets to that, is very dangerous too. So you should not rush through a large puddle of water or a flood.
So your best bet is to
just drive slowly. Yeah.
All right, and then if it's very high,
if it's very
high, if the puddle is high, and how do you driving slowly at times? Some people say, look, it doesn't really help because the water, if it's quite high, it still gets into some parts you don't want it to get to.
It will still get there if it's very high. But one thing you need to know is if you are driving fast, you have an intake, an air intake, which sucks air into the engine. Now if you drive too fast through it, remember you're accelerating. You're creating suction in the engine. You're going to suck water in. That's why we always say just go slow. Let the car just glide through.
And then how does it affect the air conditioning system? Because I know that's one system that a number of people talk about that gets affected when you drive through water. Because I've seen some people, now you want to drive through water and then they take off the AC, they turn it down or take it off entirely, and then they go through. Why
One of the reasons why they do that is because some cars carry two fans. One fan is controlled by the AC, one fan is controlled by the engine. Some just have one major fan. Now if you drive through the flood with the AC on, that fan stays on, which means it's actually going to be helping to move water around the engine. Another thing is the condenser. When you drive through flood, you're bound to pick up a whole lot of debris, mud and things on the surface of the condenser and the radiator. That will block the surface. That can cause a whole lot of issues with the air conditioning system.
So we're saying that rule of thumb is that whenever you are going through flood or puddle,
don't drive fast. Yes,
okay, now if perchance something had happened, you got into water, what kind of measures can you take? Let's say you've driven through the puddle, it was very deep, or maybe you were fast or something happened. What preventive measures can you take ASAP, like if kind of first aid, what can you do?
The first thing you want to do when you get out is check your brakes.
Check your brakes?
Yes, because definitely when water gets into between the brake pad and the rotor, your brakes are not going to be 100% anymore.
If it's automated, I'm sure it will send you a signal or something, right?
No. Even before it does that, there are some very basic things you should do.
So what can
Once
you
do? Get on a dry surface, just drive a little pump on the brake. A little pump on the brake. So you're doing stop and go, stop and go.
Okay,
that's going to heat up the brakes, dry whatever water is in between the brake pad and the brake rotor.
Does that depend on the brake system, or does any kind of brake system
any kind
you
of brake system you have to do that?
Wow, so that's one. So you ensure that your brakes are still kicking. And then if you have issues with the brakes at that point, what next?
I just advise that you park and
the car.
Call your mechanic. Seriously, you don't want to have issues with water and your brakes. You just park and call your mechanic. Then another thing that happens, which is not very common, is hydroplaning.
All right. Can you?
That is when your tires are no longer
speak English.
your tires are no longer in contact with the road when you get into a flood. I've seen it a couple of times.
You're floating.
Yeah, you're floating, exactly.
What kind of car is that one?
I saw it twice. You remember when Lekki had that very bad flood, like I think 2 years ago?
That's always.
Yeah.
That's always.
I saw it twice. I actually saw it live twice, where the owner was just turning the steering. There was no contact.
So the car was just turning on
the car was just exactly. the car was
just turning on your own.
Exactly. So that is very dangerous. That's one of the reasons why we say don't rush through flood.
But really, are you really serious about the car actually floating?
I'm serious. The car will float. One of the reasons why that will happen, apart from the water, is when you have bad tires. If you have no thread on the tire anymore, you just have a slippery surface, the car will turn into a boat.
The guy just a balloon.
It will turn into a boat.
Don't you think we need those kind of cars for some of those lucky floods? So that it just, instead of submerged, you just rise up above.
The serious thing is, you're laughing now. You don't want to be in a situation like that because it's really, really not funny.
Okay.
So it's one of the things that happens with floods, and one of the reasons why we say don't rush through floods.
Thank you very much, Ayo. It was quite a very educating and enlightening session today. If you don't want your car to turn on you, man, be careful when you are driving.